Governor, that sounds an awful lot like bribery. Hey folks, Eric from Another Voice with Eric and Friends. Today we're talking about Governor Haley's recent meeting with the Atlantic Beach Mayor and City Council. If you remember, back during Memorial Day weekend, there was a episode of violence at the end of Memorial Day where 3 people were shot dead, 7 were injured in multiple shootings toward the end of the Memorial Day weekend. Of course, going on during that Memorial Day weekend in Atlantic Beach was Bike Fest, the Black Motorcycle Celebration Week event. And immediately after the shooting, there was an outcry. We have to end Bike Week, Bike Fest. And leading that charge, it appears, was our fearless governor, Governor Haley, saying we have to end this. We don't need this kind of violence in our state, and this Bike Fest must end. Now, she called for the mayor and city council to drop it, to end Bike Week, Bike Fest. And they said, nah, we're going to keep it. We'll work on security. So she scheduled a meeting with the mayor and the council and had it this week, in which she said, when I think of Atlantic Beach, I think of history. I think of pride. The great times that were had. And we want to go back to the 40s and the heyday of Atlantic Beach. And the state wants to help Atlantic Beach redevelop and become another tourist attraction. The state willing to spend state dollars to redevelop Atlantic Beach. Oh, just one little thing. We'll do that. Just you have to end Bike Week for us to do that. There are so many aspects of this that just infuriate me. That sounds like bribery to me, plain and simple. But let's go back a minute. The governor talked about the history and the pride in 1940s. And a lot of us would say, what, in 1940s? Who wants to go back to that? Just a quick little brief history about Atlantic Beach. Atlantic Beach was the only destination, the only place where blacks could go to the beach on the Grand Strand because of segregation. And so in the 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, Atlantic Beach was the destination place on the East Coast, Southeast Coast, for beachgoers, black beachgoers. And it developed in this great town with, all kinds of activity, a bustling, just a really vibrant town because of all this tourist attraction. Well, when integration happened, which we all think is a good thing, but with integration came the ability of the people who came to Atlantic Beach to go elsewhere on the Grand Strand. So it diluted the tourists that came to Atlantic Beach, and it kind of reduced that tourism that Atlantic Beach got, and it's kind of not as much of a destination as it used to be. Atlantic Beach is doing a lot of things to try to fix that. And one of those, of course, was the Bike Fest, which they've had for many, many years now. Now, so when the governor talks of pride and history, I don't think she's talking about her remembering because she was born decades after the heyday, but the concept that Atlantic Beach was a destination. And that's cool. We would like to see that. But the governor's talking about spending taxpayer dollars to redevelop one city in South Carolina. Now, this is coming from a governor who is adamant about what the core functions of government are and who vetoed tax dollars for museums, including the local Children's Museum here in Greenville, or to other programs or commissions or whatever focused on tourist attractions in this state. She vetoed funds for other tourist attractions in this state, saying those aren't the core functions of government. So how is it, Governor Haley, that spending taxpayer dollars to redevelop a city for the purpose of tourism. How is that any better? Isn't that a bit hypocritical? There's another thing I want to ask you, Governor. Nothing that bothers me. I assume that your staff didn't inform you of the later developments in these tragic events where the individuals died. Because you keep seeming to link the gathering of black motorcyclists for a celebratory weekend with the deaths and the shootings. Even though the local police have seemed to have determined that it was local gang activity that caused these shootings, and not so much the gathering of black motorcycle riders who wanted to come to the beach. Did you not get that memo? Or is your interest in PR so big that you just ignored it? And here's the thing, Governor. You're worried about bad PR for South Carolina. We all are. We don't want South Carolina to look bad. But the fact you keep pushing this issue keeps it in the public eye. So maybe you might want to change your tactics. Maybe we won't get as much of a black eye. But here's one other thing. You know, this was a terrible tragedy. No one should have to die. There shouldn't be that violence. But it was one time, one day, one bike fest. And it wasn't even bike fest. This is an overreaction, a bad overreaction. And you know, if you're going to toss around taxpayer dollars to avoid a black eye, maybe you want to toss those taxpayer dollars to what the real problem appears to be: gang violence. Gangs in Atlantic Beach and gangs across the state. Maybe instead of worrying about bad PR and attacking something that didn't have anything to do with it, maybe you want to spend money on our law enforcement to be able to address gang activity in the state of South Carolina. But you know the one thing that really gets me, Governor? The one thing that really makes me frustrated is you rail against this concept of a big centralized government telling a smaller government what to do and saying, hey, here's money, do what we want. That is exactly what you complain about the federal government. You talk about not taking federal dollars because they come with strings, and yet you turn around and do the exact same thing. That big centralized government of South Carolina telling the little government Atlantic Beach, stop Bike Week. We don't want it. Hey man, we'll give you money. Again, a little bit on the hypocritical point. The answer to the problem of violence on Memorial Day was law enforcement, was addressing gangs. It wasn't stopping guys and girls on motorcycles coming to a festival that's been held for years. Governor, you're way off base on this. And it sounds a lot like you're trying to bribe the city of Atlantic Beach to do what you want them to do. All right, folks, Another Voice with Eric and Friends. You can find us at canigetawordin.com. We post our podcasts usually Monday evenings. You can go to Facebook at Another Voice with Eric and Friends and comment there, find other issues we're talking about. Go to YouTube at Be Another Voice or Twitter at Be Another Voice. Until we meet again, get out in your community and make a difference.